Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ujjwal. I'm a recently graduated chemistry student from the DC area. I make videos on being pre-med, productivity, and lifestyle. So if any of those things sound appealing to you, please consider subscribing. Today, we're going to be talking about how you should be reviewing your MCAT full-length exams. In addition to that, I'm also going to be sharing with you the system that helped me improve my score from full-length to full-length and how you should be tackling covering your content gaps for the different sections on the exam. Alright, so let's get right to it. The first thing that we're going to talk about is what do most people do wrong? And probably one of the most important mistakes that I see a lot of students make is they underestimate the importance of reviewing your full-length exams. If there's one thing that you take away from this video, I want that to be the understanding that reviewing your full-length exams is way more important than just taking your full-length exams. If you've seen any of my videos from the MCAT series, then you already understand and know that I'm a huge proponent of practice. It's why I believe that practice should make up 60%, if not more, of your total MCAT prep time. But that practice does no good if you don't supplement it with an effective revision of your missed questions. By going over your missed questions, that can help you essentially go and move past any kind of plateaus that you have in your score. Typically, score plateaus occur with issues in one of two areas, as we will talk about in a slide or two. It means you either have an issue in your content or an issue in terms of your strategy. So basically, our solution in this situation, in order to move past these plateaus, is we simply need to cover these content or strategy gaps. We need to figure out a different approach if we need to, and we need to go ahead and fix our problems. And it sounds simple, I know it's a lot more difficult to implement, but we're going to talk about a strategy that I use to help make this a very systematic process as you review full-length to full-length, and hopefully that'll help you find out where your weaknesses are and fix them accordingly. So before we jump right into those nitty-gritty details of the actual strategy, I want to talk about what our goals are, and it's really a three-step process. It's really important that we understand this before we jump in to review our full-lengths so that we have kind of a roadmap to guide ourselves in this process. Each full-length essentially teaches us invaluable pieces of information about our weaknesses. That information is gold because it tells us where our issues are. Our issues usually lie in either content or strategy, so by figuring out where our issue is, it'll help us target our future practice. Our job is really just to cover these gaps in either content or strategy. And the end goal, as we keep covering our content gaps or strategy issues, is to see our score improve from full-length to full-length. If you see a general trend of an upward trend towards your desired score, that means you're reviewing your full lengths properly, you're making progress. But really, if you're not, it just points towards you're not reviewing your full lengths effectively. And hopefully with an appropriate system, like we'll talk about today, you'll be able to better do so. So what does it mean if we miss a question? As I've been reiterating over and over, we have an issue in one of two areas if you miss a question. Either you didn't know the concept that the question was testing, or you didn't know the strategy. If you have an issue in terms of the concept, then or the content, that's probably one of the best case scenarios, because it's really easy to review up a concept, memorize a couple of facts. It's really straightforward process. You know it's very simple in terms of how you should be handling this. Strategy is basically, you have an issue in strategy if your issue falls outside of content. So if you knew everything you had to know, you still missed a question, you have a problem in terms of your strategy. And really, it boils down to two things. Either your comprehension is lacking or you're struggling in terms of time. And those are difficult situations to be in, but it's really important to remember with the appropriate strategy, by changing your approach, your comprehension and the amount of time you spend on each passage can be significantly improved. And as kind of a quick kind of diagnostic test per se, to see if you have an issue in terms of strategy, if you are running out of time on a particular section, your issue is usually in strategy. It could be in content as well. You could have an issue in content and strategy, but if you're running out of time, then you definitely have an issue in terms of your strategy. All right, so actual full-length review strategy. Goal, as we've talked about, want a systematic process, streamline and make this whole process straightforward, because I know some students spend entire days after taking their full length reviewing it. I don't think you should be spending that much time. You should be, you're probably tired after taking the full length anyway. And essentially reviewing your full length should be a very quick process, in my opinion. And that's how I made it essentially with the system for me. So the approach is going to be different based on the respective section. and essentially boils down to whether the section is cars or not. For cars, the issue really just boils down to strategy. As you guys already know, you don't need to know any content before you jump into this section. So any low scores for cars just means you got a strategy issue. The solution is very simple. You got to change your strategy. You got to change your approach. How do you tackle a cars passage? What's your game plan when you get in there? Because if you're struggling with cars and all you're doing is reading a passage and answering the questions after it, that's not going to work. That's not working. You got to change that up. And so change up your approach. And in addition to that, practice. So you may be wondering, well, what could I do different other than read the passage and answer the questions? Well, I made a MCAT cars video talking about a strategy that I pieced together from tips that I got from different sources that helped me essentially tackle the cars section. It helped me improve my score. I've never been a particularly great scorer when it came to reading comprehension, even back in high school for the SAT, but I was able to come up with a strategy that helped me tackle the cars passages one by one. I would go through passage by passage paragraph by paragraph. After each paragraph, I'd jump to the questions, and then I developed a system that helped me maximize my retention, because that was something I struggled with, and helped me enhance my comprehension on the way. So if you guys have an issue with cars, make sure you do that. One other piece of advice, something that's a little bit more tangible, is take note of the types of questions you're missing. For cars, questions usually come under a specific category. For example, main idea questions, they're asking about the whole passage, the author's tone, something of that nature. Take note of the questions that you're missing in terms of the type, because you may very quickly realize that you struggle with only main idea questions. And if you come to that realization, you may now be wondering, what do I do? How do I fix this? Well, you're going to be focusing on the main idea when you read the next passage. When you do your practice later on for subsequent practice passages, whether you use Jack Weston or Kaplan and whatnot, now you can really keep in mind the main idea. I talk about effective ways of honing in on the main idea and different aspects of the passage in my MCAT cars video, so I highly recommend you take a look. I'll link that down in the description below. So now let's say you're reviewing any other section. You could, if you're missing questions, it's either content or strategy, like we've talked about. Now, if it's a content issue, as I said before, very easy to handle. I have a 3-step process. First things first, when I was going through the section, let's say I was going through chem physics, I would have my full length in front of me, and I would also have notes open on the side. And then what I would do is I'd go through each question that I missed, or questions I may have gotten right, but I knew I guessed or struggled with, or had a tough time. And for those tough questions, what I would do is I'd write down the concepts. Now, if you keep in mind from one of my previous videos, I mentioned usually one question corresponds to one concept. So if I missed the question and it's a concept issue, then I know exactly what concept it is when I review it. So I'm going to write down that concept. Next, and essentially I would track these concepts that I missed and what the answers were in a Excel sheet for each full length, and all these full lengths and all this information was in an Excel workbook. I'll go ahead and show you how that's set up and laid out for you guys in the upcoming slides. So in addition to doing that, I essentially kept track of all my missed content in that manner. The reason why it's really important to track is because as you go from full length to full length, it's really important to see where you're struggling and how you're making progress. Let's say you keep struggling on orgo questions from full length to full length. That means you have a serious issue in terms of content, and you really need to brush up on orgo, not just by looking at a Khan Academy video, which is step 2. Once you figure out the concepts you're struggling with, my solution was, as I mentioned in my MCAT resources video, Khan Academy is an excellent comprehensive resource. It has a video on almost anything that you can think about. And videos are easy to digest. I'm someone who always looks to save time. And so my solution was, once I figured out the concepts I struggled with, I would find the relevant Khan Academy videos, literally one by one, watch them. If I needed to take notes, if I needed to take a good screenshot of a concept, I would do so, and then I would make a collection. And basically those pieces of notes and that Excel sheet and all that stuff is useful for the 3rd step, which is create Anki flashcards. I've talked about Anki flashcards quite well in previous videos. So if you guys would like me to make a dedicated video for Anki, let me know in the comments down below. I'll do so. But basically the goal here is with Anki flashcards, you have active recall and spaced repetition, which will pull those missed concepts that you had from your full length and put those and commit those to memory. Because it doesn't matter if you just review your full length if you're not going to commit those things that you missed to memory, so that you actually know those the concepts you missed for the exam. So that's basically the 3-step process for handling content issues. Now, strategy issues, the technique really comes down to being the same as for cars. You got to change up your approach. You got to change up your game plan for the passage. What do I mean by game plan? When you take a MCAT practice or the actual exam, when you start a section, you need to know how you're going to approach each passage in a very systematic fashion. If your strategy is to just read the passage, answer the questions, if you're scoring really high, well, first of all, you're probably not watching this video then. But if you're, most of us, sometimes we struggle early on. And in that case, that means reading the passage, answering the questions doesn't work. You need to change up your approach. And so that's really where strategy comes down to. Changing up your approach needs to maximize retention, minimize amount of time on a passage, while also increasing accuracy. And so you figure out a strategy that works for you. And so, for example, for the biochem section, my strategy was create mini diagrams for each paragraph to better understand the biological system being described. I made a video about that, and I'll go ahead and link that down in the description as well. But not only do you figure out the strategy that works, you also got to practice it. Otherwise, that strategy will take too long to implement. You may be wondering, when I talked about my strategy for biochem, drawing diagrams, isn't that going to take an extremely long amount of time? Well, yeah, it would take a long amount of time if I developed that strategy a week before my exam and then went in for the exam. But you practice this strategy over the course of a couple of full lengths, and that's really going to help you maximize your speed in terms of the systematic process, this approach you've developed for yourself, and have a game plan. Usually, the worst situations to be in when you're dealing with a difficult difficult section is to not have a game plan, not have a systematic process for getting yourself on track. And I believe that by having the appropriate approach, you will help mitigate and help bypass these strategy issues that people tend to face. All right. So that's basically it for the entire discussion of my strategy for how you should be reviewing your full lengths. Now, something that's a little bit more tangible is this full length review tracker. So basically, as I talked about, I had a workbook, and as you can see, I had different sheets. So for the sample test, full length 1, 2, 3, 4, my section banks, I made sure I had a sheet for everything. I wanted to track everything I missed because I knew that missing questions, yeah, it sucks, but it's also the best place where I can learn about my weaknesses and I can improve from them. So here, as you can see on each sheet, I had 3 sections. Cars, for obvious reasons, I didn't have one because I can't really fix anything. If I figure out a specific type of question that I had a tough time with, I would take note of that separately. It didn't really require space on an Excel sheet. So here's what I did. 4 columns. Chem physics, biochem, psych soc. Concept, so the concept that I missed in a question format. The reason why: active recall questions are the best way to review concepts. The best way to review something, let's say I was on the psych soc section and I had a question about the different parts of the eye. Then what I would write here is, in the first column, what are the different parts of the eye? And then in the second column, answer, I would talk about it. So third column and fourth column were really just for tracking purposes. I'm trying to track and see, first of all, where did my information come from in case I want to reference it later on. And so third column is the question number. And finally, my last column here is the subject. So that's really just to track and see how I'm doing from full length to full length. And I think tracking your progress in different sections, in different subjects, is really important to help orient yourself. Because remember, MCAT content review and practice aren't like 2 separate sections of your whole MCAT preparation. While you're doing practice, you will still be referring back to content for content review. And so keeping track of where you're struggling the most can really help you in this dynamic process. All right, so those are the 4 columns. And the next thing I would do is step 3 of the process. So this was step 1. So step 3 was basically to create Anki flashcards. So here's like a quick screenshot of my MCAT Anki deck. Here is my deck, my sub decks, and as you can see here, I have a sub deck for the full length reviews. And as you can see, this is an example screenshot of me making a flashcard. So basically what I would do is, this is like a closed deletion card. And once again, if you want me to make a video talking about all this Anki stuff in more depth, please let me know. But basically, I created a specific type of card to essentially help me have my active recall question, and then extras. So basically in the extra section, I would go ahead and put, let's say I was looking at a concept. So here, this was psych soc. What are the adaptive coping mechanisms? And then I would take the answers and put that in a closed deletion. And then let's say I was watching a Khan Academy video that mentioned this, and there was a good screenshot with all this stuff. Visual representation is a very good way of committing things to memory. So then I would add that in the extra section. So then when I was going through the Anki flashcard, let's say I wanted a little bit more context, because remember, if you're making a flashcard in the review section, in the review subdeck, it means you missed this. It means you had a tough time remembering it in the first place if you didn't cover it appropriately. And so it's really important to put as many visual aids and any other kind of memory techniques that you have in here as possible in the extra section, so you can help solidify the concept as you keep reviewing this. And then tags are very important for those last two columns. As I said before, we want to make sure we know where the content came from. So I would, for example, if it's full length 1, FL1, and then I would go ahead and write the subject. So here, this was a psych card, and so then I would write psych. Now here's why it's important. You may think it's not that important to tag cards or whatever, but really it is important, because let's say you want to review all the questions you missed in psych. You want to know what are all the concepts I struggled with in psych. I want to go ahead and review them all today. By using the tags, you can easily search up the cards and review them. In addition to this, when you tag them by the exam or the location it came from, you can very easily see how many missed concept cards you're creating for full length, and then you can see if you're getting better or not. That's also one other technique. But yeah, that's basically it for the full length review tracker. I'm going to try to put this in the description below if I can figure out how. But if not, it's a very simple format. You can make this yourself, and I highly encourage you supplement this with Anki, or if you really aren't using Anki, Quizlet or whatever it may be. But it's really important to have those active recall questions, because trust me, you don't want to forget this material essentially come test day. It's very easy to do so. That's why we miss these questions in the full lengths in the first place. But if we have an effective strategy and systematic system for making sure that we never forget these concepts, you will be on track to essentially getting reaching your targets. But yeah, that's it. So if you guys have any questions, as always, just go ahead and leave a comment down below. I'll be happy to respond as soon as possible. And if you have a longer question, just go ahead and shoot me an email, send me an Instagram DM. I do respond to all Instagram DMs. But other than that, I think that's it for this video, guys. I hope you're all doing well. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you guys in that next one. Take care.